Okay, so we're trying this again. We had a horrible connection 30 minutes ago, so we'll try this again. Thanks, Mary, for coming back. We'll be trying to discuss my last discussion with John Vervaeke.
Right.
And we'll go through this chronologically because you wanted to get us started with spiritual ambiguity.
Right. Okay, so the first thing I want to say is that I thought the discussion was really great. And I think you brought things out of John that I have not seen in any other discussions. Now, I have a friend who says people are not ready, people are not going to hear the answers to questions they have not asked or questions they have not asked yet. Okay? So, like when I started listening to Jordan Peterson, one of the things I thought is he's getting everybody to ask better questions.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I heard John Vervaeke talking to you, I thought, oh, great, these are even better questions. Because I really think his questions were outstanding. They were like shockingly good, you know?
Yeah.
And so, so I think it'll be fun to go through his questions and see what we can come up with. Okay, so I want to give like full credit to his argumentation that he's doing. So he starts off by talking about this thing called spiritual ambiguity, which is the idea that if we look at the evidence for there being a personal God or versus there being a personal God, that it's ambiguous, that the evidence is ambiguous. And I'm just going to take him at his word on that. You know, you kind of said something similar when you were talking to him, you know, that there's order and there's disorder. There's also good and there's evil. And so it looks like it could be ambiguous.
Yeah,
you know,
we haven't dived really deep into John Hicks's work on spiritual ambiguity, but from what I've seen, it's, you know, a lot of those arguments rest on the idea that, well, there is enough order in the universe that it seems like there's someone behind it, but at the same time, there's too much disorder for there to really seem like there's someone behind it. So people can flip sort of both ways.
Yeah. Okay, so let's grant that it's ambiguous. I'm fine with that. And then, then John Vervaeke goes on to say, and I try to copy down some of the things he said in the video with you. He said, I think the strongest case you can make for our relationship to the sacred, by which we try to give a metaphysical explanation of our experience of the sacred, is non-theism, because non-theism sits very well with the ambiguity of the information, because it directly rejects the presuppositions between the theist and the atheist. And the non-theism is also very much more capable of embracing the equality between theists and non-theists, and non-theistic representations of experience of sacredness in a way in which at least much of theism isn't. So one of John's concerns is that we're not prejudicial in the way we look at people having spiritual experiences, where we're going to say one set of spiritual experiences is superior to another, and therefore this set of persons is superior to another set of persons in terms of how they're interpreting, or their intelligence, or their spirituality, or whatever. So that's kind of where he starts, and then he says, then he wants to ask a question of those who believe in God. Okay, he says, I want to know phenomenologically what it is that people are experiencing that make them feel that non-reductive naturalism, which is his position, can't address it. Because now we're not talking ontologically, so we can talk about that, but now we're talking about what is it you think would be shown to be an illusion. Okay, so he wants to focus on if I interpret your phenomenological experience in this way, what will you feel you've lost? Or
in which way? In a physicalist way?
Right.
Okay.
What will you think you're losing? What will you think will be shown to be an illusion? And that's an interesting statement. I kind of want to bookmark that and come back to it.
Yeah.
Then he talks about himself and the profound mystical experiences. He's had deep experience of oneness, experience of pure consciousness event. And he talks about the fact that He has studied other people, their traditions, their spiritual experiences, and he wants to establish his own bona fides as far as, being someone who is expert in this. And I think we should grant him that. I don't think there's any reason to doubt what he says about his own experience. And he brings out that people who have had experiences and who then read what he says find him to be insightful and articulate. Mm-hmm. And he does publish on this. It is a field of his expertise. All that's granted to him. I have no problem with that. And then he comes to another question. What is it you think you are undergoing that licenses you claiming that the ontology I'm presenting is inadequate because it can't capture the key crucial phenomenological concept? So,
quick logistical point, if I may.
Sure.
Could you lower your camera aim just a bit? Because sometimes it cuts off the lower part of your face.
We'll see if I can do this. Is that better?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So then he gets into what his ontology is. Remember, he wants to say to us, what is it about my ontology that's not capturing everything for you? So here's his ontology. First, from the physical realm, he goes into that. When we get down into like the very basis of physical reality, where there's nothing there, which is a point I made in one of my Ratzinger videos. Like, when we go down, it's nothing. It's just mathematical probability, waves of probability, right?
Seems there's just potential there with
just potential, right? And like we can look out and see a bunch of galaxies, and that's just more nothing, So we're surrounded by lots of, we're surrounded by lots of nothing. Okay, so then, and then you had made the point that when you were thinking very nihilistically,
mm-hmm.
that when you conceived of the universe as this, just nothing but this like nothing but thing, nothing but matter, nothing but this, that it led you into nihilism. And he wants to make clear the point that his non-theism is not nihilism, right?
Yeah, he has very good anti-reductionistic arguments.
Right. And he says, now having dealt with that, he says, I don't understand the sacred, that which is a source of experiences of sacredness, as any sort of personal being with a moral agenda. But he wants to make the point, even though I don't think the sacred originates in a person with a moral agenda, we are moral agents and we can operate morally or immorally towards our experience of the sacred. And I think we both would agree with that. Okay. So, one thing I want to say about the ambiguity is that although we can look at it and say there's ambiguity, I would say if you look at it in terms of what human beings have thought and felt about the sacred over the course of history and even now around the world, you would say that it's not ambiguous. Okay, almost everyone has thought of there being personal agents beyond the human within the space of the sacred, within the space of, their religious encounters. And that's true even of Taoists, even of Buddhists. In some Buddhist traditions, Buddha himself is elevated to a god. He's prayed to. Different, some of the like the Taoist tradition is supposed to be atheist, but Taoist worship, they have offerings, they have many of them have a pantheon of deities that they subscribe to. And so generally speaking, most human beings have, in their encounter with the sacred, had a concept of that they're dealing with persons or personal beings of some kind.
I'm curious about if maybe you can help me with something here. Do you think that when 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 cognitive scientists today study spiritual experiences, I don't know if they include the experiences of, let's say, mystics who see people as well. On the one hand, there are indeed lots of mystics who talk about epictesis, like John said, where it's more of a never-ending self-transcendence, and there's no clear being there. But there's also lots of stories of saints, especially women who see live people. Like in the Catholic Church, there's lots of stories of sisters who saw maybe the child Jesus, or Jesus as or the Virgin Mary. This sort of, it seems to me like this is a mystical experience as well.
Well, right, but I think that's where John would like to say that I would show you that that's an illusion. Okay. So he's going to go with, if it's ambiguous, that's where the ambiguity comes in. Some say person, some say no. Yeah. And then he's going to say, okay, I'm going to take the position that the non-person is the ultimate reality. And if you think it's personal, then it's an illusion. Okay?
Yep. I see where you're going.
Okay. That's where he's come from. So, appreciate him being honest about that. He thinks that maybe we're worried that if we grant him too much, that we're going to suddenly find out that we're involved in an illusion. Okay, so this is an improvement. This is a bit of an improvement, I'll tell you. So, a number of years ago, I talked about this with Paul van der Klee. My first video I did with Paul van der Klee is I had gotten in this conversation with an atheist, a real long, detailed, very ironic, frank conversation a number of years ago. And the way that we concluded was, I thought he was blind, and he thought I was crazy.
Yeah, that's okay?
Yeah. All right. And so, that was kind of where the whole thing has been. The whole thing between the Christians and the atheists has been for a while. Is we say they're blind, they say we're crazy. Well, what I was telling Paul van der Klee was, if you look at that in terms of society, think about, how do we treat people who are blind? We make every effort to give them maximum access to everything in the society, right? We provide them with books, with braille books or spoken books. We put little signs like in the elevator so they can navigate, everything. We do everything we can to include them in society despite that handicap. What do we do with people who are crazy, right? We may lock them up. We may take away their children. We may decide that they're not competent to have, responsible jobs. So from a society standpoint, if you end up with the population kind of equally distributed, with one half thinking the other half is blind and them thinking the other half is crazy, you can see the implications of that are pretty dire, right? For the people who are thought of as crazy. So that was why I remember I was telling you last time, we got to get out of this materialism. It's like, it's killing us, right?
I see what you're doing. Yeah.
So I would say John's position that, that maybe it's an illusion is probably a little bit better than saying that it's a delusion and you're crazy, right? So we're coming along. We're in a better position.
Yeah.
Okay. So John's ontology, he says that he believes that there's a ground of being, right, that expresses itself. And there's a ground of intelligibility that sets the constraints so that what comes into being is intelligible.
Yep.
Now, he wasn't very clear on what he thinks is the relationship between the ground of being that expresses itself and the ground of intelligibility. I'm not sure how he thinks of those two things as related, whether they're both aspects of the one.
I don't know how Neoplatonist wants to go there. Because I know he's critical of emanationism. I don't think he would want to say that for instance, the ground of intelligibility just flows from the ground of being, like Plotinus would say? Because I have heard him mention that he thinks there are issues with Neoplatonism, with strict imaginationism, but I can't really say exactly what is the relationship between the two for him.
Okay, but that's, I'm going to say this is like a hamburger. So the bottom bun, the bottom bun is this ground of being and this ground of intelligibility. Okay, so and then you've got the cosmos and us and everything, you know, that we see and experience. Okay, and then you've got the top bun, and that would be like we're going up. Okay, of the levels, and then at the top you've got this one that is. And I don't know what the relationship is between that one that we could experience, that we can experience in this life, and maybe headed to this non-personal one that we kind of would dissolve into.
I think for him, he wants to say that the one is the ground of being.
Okay, so he's got, so the bottom bun and the top bun are the same thing in his stack.
Okay, I don't see your bottom end, so maybe that's part of the issue. So what you were saying is that
well, I'm thinking of source. I'm thinking of source.
Yep.
And then what we go to, you know, what we're headed toward or what we're trying to contact in through the process of transformation, and what it may be that we're headed toward as we go into eternity.
Okay, so
I'm thinking of source and then end.
I don't think you don't think that he wants to talk about teleology, though?
He says he doesn't want to talk about teleology if it is a continuing story. But but there's still an eschatology if the story ends. I mean, there's an end, right?
For him?
He says, pardon?
For him?
Yeah, because he said that. He said, you know, the story of your life, or the story of his life, if he's talking personally, is going to come to an end. Yeah. And it ends in, he seems to think, in like kind of like a merging with the one, but it's an end of any personality, any individuality. You know, it ends.
Yeah. It seems like just death as nothing, basically.
Right. It's nothing, but he's willing to grant that it may be a merging with a oneness, because he said that's something people experience even now. But that either way it's the end of this personal story.
Yeah, right? I guess you could say that. Yeah, you sort of dissolve into the nothingness, into the bare potential, maybe.
Right. Okay. So we've got. So I'm saying. So we've got the hamburger. Right? We've got the bottom, the origin. We've got the middle. That's the experience now and the cosmos, and then we've got the top, and that's like the end. Right? We'll say. I'm trying to say that's his hamburger. Okay.
All right.
All right. And so you're saying that his bottom and top are the same thing, from what you understand.
Because when he talks about the one, I do think that he has Plotinus in mind, where this whole sort of totality of there's a ground of being, and then there's intelligibility to it, and from this there's things that can emerge. But I don't think that it's not like, I don't think for him the ground of being is not really literally like the lower layer, and then there are things on top of it. I really think he wants to say, like Plotinus did, that the ground of being is the one in sense of what holds everything together, what explains how it is that, you know, any two things can coexist in the world. And why is it that a planet here, a planet there can coexist? Why is it that that things can come together in beauty, in harmony, whatever
Right.
the fabric, whatever holds things together?
Like the logos.
I don't think for him the logo should be the intellect. It would be the constraints on
Oh, okay.
on that potential. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah. So if I can try to sketch it out, I think for him there is at the fundamentals of his ontology, there's the one, that which holds everything together, and this is present in everything because everything has to hold together.
Right.
And there's tons of potential there because any things that can hold together basically are potential in that one. And then he has a ground of intelligibility where all that potential which can maybe hold together is constrained in precise ways. And we can even see this ourselves in the way that when I look at the world, I don't just see bare potential. There's all kinds of constraints, which part of this is this is the way my relevance realization works, and I keep constraining that potential into something
Right.
I can perceive, into my consciousness, with which I can deal. But I think that this reflects something cosmic for him, where the entire possibility, which emanates from the one, is constrained by that ground of intelligibility. I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah, that made sense. That made sense. Okay. I still want to use the hamburger analogy, and you'll understand why in a minute.
Okay.
But I want to say, okay, so we have an origin. So let's say we have an origin, and we also have something that we're going toward.
Okay.
And in between is all held together. And that can be the same thing on the top and on the bottom. It can be the same thing as the origin and the goal.
Yep.
Can be the same thing, and it can go all the way through. But I want to get that kind of like that picture of we've got something that's an origin and something that's a goal. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So then he wants to say, right, that one of his arguments against this being conscious is that in classical theism, God is perfect, but that there can be no perfectibility for relevance realization. Right?
Yeah.
Because he
I
said
think
that.
that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. And so because relevance realization is not perfectible, and relevance realization is what it would mean in his mind for something to even be intelligent, to be personal, then he wouldn't connect that with the one or with the ultimate reality. Okay, so that's one of the points he made. So that's where he is with his ontology that he presented. Okay, and so if you compare that to our ontology, to Christian ontology, we would say that, and I'm just using the hamburger analogy, that the bottom bun, the basis, the origin of all, is the Holy Trinity. And then you have the cosmos is created by the Trinity, but it's the source. The Trinity is the source of the cosmos, the source of being, and is also the goal of being. Right?
Yep.
So we have we have the Trinity, we have the cosmos, we have the Trinity, but the Trinity, of course, is all the way through.
Yep.
Holding the logos is all the way through all of the creation, right?
Yep. So
the reason I wanted to do this thing of making an analogy to hamburger is this. So Burger King has just come out with this thing called the Impossible Burger. Have you heard of that?
No.
Okay, so what the Impossible Burger is a vegan hamburger. All right, it's made in a laboratory of a bunch of plant material.
Okay.
And the goal of Burger King was to create something that phenomenologically is just like eating a hamburger. So that if you bite into it, if you smell it, if you taste it, if you know, chew it, if you can't tell the difference between it and a hamburger made of meat.
Okay, yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
Phenomenologically, you can't tell the difference. Okay? So so Burger King has come up with this idea that it's phenomenologically that they've created, that you can have the same experience whether you're eating the vegan burger or you're eating the hamburger.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So here's the question. All right. Would I be afraid to try the veggie burger because I think that it would make meat an illusion? Would it mean that, I mean, if I were, now I would never eat this thing to start off with. For that matter, I wouldn't even eat Burger King's meat hamburgers. But let's just say that I would. Let's say they made their meat hamburgers out of grass-fed beef and everything was organic. Then I might be willing to eat one of their hamburgers, but I would never eat one of their vegan burgers. But let's just say that I would eat a vegan burger. Would I then start to think that my experience of the meat burger was an illusion? Is all there is to it? The phenomenology of the smell and the taste, is that all there is to the burger?
But does that mean that you're conceding to John that the phenomenological experience you get in this system is the same? Like
not exactly. I'm not quite done.
Okay.
But I'm willing to concede that the phenomenology of smelling the vegan burger and chewing the vegan burger is phenomenologically the same as the meat burger. But if that's the only aspect of the phenomenology that you consider, okay? The question is, okay, so suppose Burger King came out and made this announcement and said, you know, we've introduced this vegan burger and people are trying it and they say they can't tell the difference between that and a meat burger. And guess what, people? We've been fooling you actually for the past 10 years. We've been giving you these vegan burgers and you haven't even noticed it. All right?
Yeah.
So how would I prove that Burger King was not telling me the truth about that? I'd have to deal with a wider range of phenomena, right? I'd have to say, okay, so part of my experience of living in a world with Burger King and with hamburgers is also a more encompassing phenomenon. Like, it's not just the taste of the burger, it's things like the fact that I know that beef cattle, I've seen beef cattle, you know, I've seen trucks carrying cattle, I've seen trucks of meat, right? I know of freezers of meat lockers, right? Butchers, that's part of my phenomena. People who cook meat, and also part of the phenomena of eating is the nourishment that goes into my body from the meat, which is not the same as the nourishment of the vegan burger.
Yeah, our taste is influenced by what we crave.
Yeah. So, you know, so yes, if you're going to constrain your phenomena to just, you're going to say, okay, we're just going to deal like I would be willing to concede. I don't know this because I haven't done my own research on it. I'm not going to anyway, but I'd be willing to concede that in terms of self-transcendence and in terms of acquiring wisdom, defined in a particular way, that you could say the phenomena are the same. All right. But I think that's not taking into consideration all of the phenomena that are involved. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah. It would just, yeah, it would be surprising for me that even the self-transcendence would be exactly the same, because there are, if we go back to the examples of, let's say, nuns in the Middle Ages who had an apparition of Christ, for instance, this is, I don't know that this, the sort of self-transcendence that you get there.
Right, I understand what you're saying, but I want to give John as much ground as possible.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I want to give him, I want to give him as much. Let's grant him as much as possible. Let's grant, because neither of us are experts in this phenomena that he's been studying. So let's just grant him that he's what he's saying about the phenomena, because I think we can deal with that.
Okay.
All right. I just think that it's like he sees the Burger King burgers as in existence for the phenomena of the taste and the smell of the burger. And what I'm trying to say is there's a whole lot more than that to the phenomena.
Okay.
All right, does that make sense? So I think seeing religion only in terms of self-transcendence is too narrow of a phenomenon. So I want to throw in more phenomena.
Okay, I see.
All right, to make the comparison. So here's a phenomena that I think is universal with religion. It's archetypal. And that is the sense of being in a cosmic battle between good and evil. Okay? So that's something that is observed even in little children. The sense that you are in a battle between good and evil, and that it's not just, it's like that your stance toward good and evil is somehow connected with a cosmic battle that's going on. All right? And that's the basis of so much of our stories. We wouldn't have...
in Eastern religions as well, like Taoism or Buddhism?
I think it's true in Hinduism from the Hindu mythology, but I think that whether it's part of the religion of Buddhism or Taoism, it's part of the phenomena that the people experience.
Okay,
it's a universal human phenomena to feel involved in a cosmic battle between good and evil. So what I want to say now about Christianity and about, let's say, religion in general, but especially Christianity, is that what is the horizon of this battle? Because, all right, if the horizon of the cosmic battle of good and evil is only in this life and is only in this world, we're in a lot of trouble. Because that's Marxism, that's Nazism right there. It's all on this plane of existence. So one of the things that religion has done, that religions that have God, personal God, moral God, have done, is take the phenomenon of the consciousness of the battle between good and evil and push it beyond the horizon of the timeline of a human life and beyond the horizon of this world. And that serves an extremely important function within human psychology and within human society. Does that make sense, what I said?
Yeah, I'd like to give John his due. I think he would have very good arguments to maintain a strong form of ethical realism, of saying that even if there's no real cosmic battle between good and evil, that this would not lower our need to individually actually do fight evil and to actually try to live virtuously and to cultivate virtue and wisdom and so on. But I do think that you would have to concede that in order for this to scale, for this, let's say, I don't think you would let's say, in the case of someone who has really achieved self-transcendence, who is practicing sort of John's project, who is wise, who is virtuous, I think that person can be very virtuous, as is a religious person. But the question is, can this goodness, can this striving for virtue scale even for people who do not have those spiritual experiences? In a system where, if you're in a system where there's no cosmic battle between good and evil, can the lay people who don't have those spiritual experiences still behave as morally as the people who, as the lay people in a system where there is a battle between good and evil? Do you see the point I'm making?
Yes. Okay. And that's what I'm pointing out,
yep.
that from the standpoint of the whole society,
yep.
when you collapse that and bring it down only into this life and this life, in this world, you're in a world of trouble. And we actually have evidence of that, because that's exactly what Marxism does. It's exactly what the Nazis did. And so it's the cosmic is now, it's on this plane. And when it's on this plane and all that energy, that's, we could call it spiritual energy, is then focused on here and now, it becomes eruptive and dangerous and destructive. But by being pushed out into that cosmic realm, it's much safer. I'm going to say that that's an advantage. Okay.
Yeah. So you're putting that in the phenomena.
I'm putting that in the phenomena part of it is the sense of being involved in that cosmic battle. And what happens if you remove the cosmic from it? And it's just here and now. Okay. So then the other thing is that having this transcendent sense of the morality that can judge the human, that is above the human, that it relativizes human power. And without a relativization of human power, kind of like, for example, you take the government of the United States, but we say, the government is established that our rights come from God, not from the government. Okay, so the human power, the human power is relativized. And how are you going to relativize human power apart from that? Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm trying to figure out how you could respond exactly. Yeah, it would be difficult. I think in order for him to answer all of those points, he would need to really find a way for this self-transcendence to scale not only to the mystics, but to everyone. And that's all I can say. I don't have any better to do. Yeah.
Okay. Another phenomenological part of this is the sense that family life is connected to the sacred. Okay, that family life is made up of what we might call holy or sacred contracts, involving oaths, involving fidelity, involving covenant, and that's true, weddings, births, all of religious events in all societies and cultures, right? And the commitment of the man and woman to each other and then to their children is seen as sacred. And that is a phenomenological, that was something that we experience phenomenologically. We experience the sacredness of that. All right. And because of that, we have a sense of having a responsibility to something or someone above the human, above the mere human, in carrying out those responsibilities to family life. And that without that, you're going to have disorder, dissolution, destruction within family life, and what that's going to harm the most is going to be the most vulnerable members of the society, especially children. And this is where Christianity really shines, because it's Christianity that elevated the child. And Jesus said, unless you become like a child, and unless you, and, if you give, a drink of water to a child in my name, that kind of thing. He elevated the status of children, including by himself, by the incarnation, by being a child himself. So he elevated the status of children, and that is a tremendous change, and it's a tremendous progress for humanity that he did that. And that to lose that is very dangerous. It's dangerous for the whole culture. It's dangerous for the whole society. And this is especially true in Trinitarian theology, where we see the family as a mirror. The family is actually connected to the Trinity, because we see the family as a mirror of the Trinity.
Can you spell that out?
Okay, so what you have in the Trinity is that the love between the Father and the Son. Let me start back with, so the Father, you have the Father, and of course I'm going to say this, and when I say it, it's going to sound like I'm talking about a time thing, but it's not a time thing, because it's an eternal thing.
Yeah, it's an ontological claim.
Pardon?
It's an ontological claim happening at every moment.
In order to express it, I have to say one thing after another. Okay, so you have the Father. The Father is self-aware, expresses himself to himself, and also outwardly. So let's say the Father says, I.
Yep.
The I of the Father, the self-expression of the Father, because it is God doing the expressing, there will be no lack within that self-expression. There will be nothing of that self-expression that is not God. All right? So that's the Son.
Yep.
So now you have the Father, you have the Son, all right? And the Father and the Son love one another. And you could say the Father and the Son, there's a certain we-ness, right? That the Father and the Son can say we, in expressing their unity and their love for one another, and that's the Holy Spirit. Okay? So that the Holy Spirit is the love between the Father and the Son. And since only God can fully express God, the Holy Spirit is also God. So you have in the family, the love between the husband and wife is so real that it becomes a third person, a child. Okay? So the family then is a mirror of the Holy Trinity. So that's why I'm saying, especially in a Trinitarian understanding of God, the sacredness of the family is very elevated. And that sense of the sacredness of the family and the connection of the family to God is a great force for the stability of the whole society. Okay, because the more disordered family life is, the more chaotic and messed up society is, right? Okay. Now,
can I try to summarize this? Because there's the move you're trying to make is, you fully concede to John that in terms of peak spiritual experiences, whether you're in a Christian system or in his system, the peak experiences are the same. But what you're trying to do is to say that the whole pyramid of spiritual experiences is much wider than in his system. You include in spiritual experiences, like the family. You include the sense of being in a battle between good and evil, and so on. And I don't know. There's a part of it where John could answer. I think that he is willing to concede that some things are existentially necessary for us, like maybe the fact that we need a spirituality where there is a battle between between good and evil for us to just live and keep doing relevance realization. He may well concede that, but he would not go to the ontological claim of saying that well, there actually is a battle between good and evil. But then I don't know what you would say to the fact of where do you put the line? Where is it that the spiritual experiences stop exactly? And you keep making new candidates, which I'll have to think about it. I don't know how we would deal with those. Yeah, that's a good point. Good strategy.
Okay, so now speaking of Jesus, right? Because I was talking about Jesus elevating the status of children. Okay, so I want to talk about Jesus for a minute because John really loves Jesus. I do want to say this.
Yep.
John has expressed himself with great personal affection, devotion, admiration to the person of Jesus as revealed in the New Testament. Mm-hmm. As he himself says, because he was asked one time, what would you like to achieve personally, spiritually? And he said the wisdom of Socrates and the agape love of Jesus, right?
Yep.
Okay. So I want to deal with that thing about the agape love of Jesus, which John's description of was just amazing in his series, and Paul Vanderklay's repeatedly mentioned it. Yep. Okay. Here's the thing. Jesus said, I'm going to prepare a place for you so that where I am, you may also be. All right? So I guess I would leave hanging in the air this question. And the question is, would that be loving of Jesus to have made that promise if it were not true? In other words, can we separate the Jesus who is love and agape and the very highest manifestation of agape that the world has ever seen, and what Jesus said he was intending for us? Would it be, and I'm not trying to quite do the liar, lunatic, or Lord thing of C.S. Lewis. That's not where I'm going. Mm-hmm. What I want to say is, would it be loving? That's what I want to focus on. Would it have been loving of Jesus to make promises to us that are not true? If you're going to grant that he's this, icon of love, would he have made promises to us that are not true? I just want to leave that question there because I think that's an important question to deal with. Now, I also want to mention that he talks about the axial age, axial age religious viewpoint. I do want to mention that, of course, Christianity is not an axial age religion. So the axial age is variously dated, sometimes 800 to 300 BC, 800 to 200, something like that. But Christianity is not an axial age, not in the axial age.
Well, could you? I don't recall exactly what that would mean. I think the point he was mostly attacking was the two worlds mythology.
Yes, right. He is, but it's something he's saying, the axial age and axial age mythology. I'm just making the point that Christianity is not an axial age religion. And now Judaism, they would say, is. Like, I think in that time frame, you're going to be putting maybe Moses or King David. David's like 1000 BC, I guess. Moses is maybe, I guess, 1400, something like that. Or you're certainly putting like the prophets, the ancient Hebrew prophets would be axial age.
But is it just by axial age? Do you refer to the period, or do you refer to some sort of ontology?
I'm referring to the period. But what I want to say is that Christianity does something with what it receives from the Axial Age, both in terms of the Greek philosophy and in terms of the Hebrew tradition.
Yeah.
So it does something with them. It's not itself part of that. It's not itself in that age. And I believe that what it does with that is new. So when he's talking about two worlds, I guess he's talking about like heaven and earth, right?
I think it's talking about the natural and supernatural.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Natural and supernatural. And what I would say to that is that construal, that construal is not essential. Would say that it's not an essential to Christianity.
Yeah,
there's other ways to pardon.
Yeah, I think John would agree there. That's in a series he talked about the fact how actually before Aquinas there was no natural supernatural distinction, but what John claims, I think, is that progressively what occurred was, basically there was a very good integration between the, I don't want to say natural, supernatural. There was a very clean integration of the world from matter all the way towards God. There were clean links between man and God, and these links got progressively severed, starting from the Middle Ages, when Aristotle made his way back into Christianity during the Crusades, and then Aquinas to address the coming Aristotelianism, baptized Aristotle, and then he made the natural supernatural distinction. And then John explores in his lectures how this separation progressively eroded until the supernatural just disappeared completely. So I think that John would agree that it's not necessary that Christianity has to be conceived in terms of a two-world mythology where there is natural and supernatural, but he would claim that historically that is what has occurred, and this is what has broken down. And the challenge that he hopes, I think he genuinely hopes that we can face that challenge, is to reformulate Christianity, or to express it in a way. As you said, Christianity is not bound to this, and originally it was not. So the challenge is to express how it is to modern people, that there's no hard clash between man and God, between the natural and supernatural.
Right. And I think, did you see the conversation I had with Sibylla King talking about the phenomenologists, Catholic phenomenologists?
Yeah, I watched that.
Yeah. So,
it's been a while, you'll have to refresh my mind.
Okay. So, she's got the Quality Existence channel, and she's talking about Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance and the pre-intellectual awareness of quality, and that Persig talks about in Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And so I was exploring some of the Catholic phenomenologists, especially Dietrich von Hildebrand, and I ran into the argumentation that's going on between the Catholic phenomenologists and the Thomists, to see that there are other ways besides the Thomistic, besides the Thomistic metaphysics to construe things. So this is a live argument and conversation within Catholicism, and so.
And even outside of Catholicism, if you go to the Orthodox, they're still very Neoplatonic, and they don't have that hard natural supernatural distinction like we do.
Right. So, I think that Christianity is way more robust than what John kind of maybe is giving it credit to.
I do think he has a good point with relevance realization, though. This is his last point. Do you have other things you want to say before that?
Yeah, I do. I have. Yeah, I'm going to get into the relevance realization. Just a couple more things.
It's good. I trust you. You've been leading us very well, so I trust you.
Okay, so here's one. I want to do like a thought experiment for a minute. So let's say that you have a loved one and especially this would work if you're in this, someone you're in a spousal relationship with, although I know you're not, but you could think of some loved one that you have, maybe like a best friend or something.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say that evidence, that incontrovertible evidence was given to you that the entire time that you have known this person, they have been a robot.
Okay.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right, think about that.
Mm-hmm.
Incontrovertible evidence is given to you that they have been a programmed robot the entire time that you have known them.
And the implication is that this robot
Well, here's the question.
Okay.
Here's the question. Let's say that you decide that it would be too disruptive to your life to get rid of this robot, even though you could, it's just a robot. Mm-hmm. And you decide to carry on with your life as in the way that you have been, as with this robot now, trying to live as you were with a person before, what you thought was a person.
Okay, and
okay, now here's the question. Now the robot goes and buys you a birthday present.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And before that, I need to ask you a question about is the robot conscious?
The robot, no, the robot does not know that it's a robot. Okay. It's programmed to think that it's human.
And it has no real phenomenological experience?
It has no real phenomenological experience. Okay. It's just programming.
Okay.
Okay. So here's the thing. The robot goes and buys you a birthday present.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you say thank you to the robot? Because before, when you thought it was a person, you'd be like, "Oh, thank you. How'd you know I wanted this?" Do you say thank you to now that you know that it's a robot? Do you say thank you?
No, it's going to be much harder to behave well with that robot.
Is gratitude going to be difficult?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the thing. Thinking about that. When John Vervaeke was in his conversation that he had, I don't know if you saw this, he was in a 4-way conversation with Jordan Hall and
Guy Sengstock and Mastro Pietro.
Right. Okay. And they had this great conversation. And at some point in that conversation, John was very excited about what was going on. And he said, guess what he said? He said, "Thank God." Okay. Now, think about that for just a minute. Now, here's the thing. The phenomenological experience of gratitude and how we direct it. All right.
Mm-hmm.
If you asked me, what'd you do today? And I said, I cleaned my house and I went to the grocery store and I thanked. What would you say?
Thank to what? Ooh.
Thank you, right? Thanked it's a transitive verb. It has to have an object, right?
Yeah.
So when we feel gratitude, that's a phenomenological thing that all people feel.
Yeah.
To who are we directing thanks?
Yeah, okay? Persons.
It has to be to a person, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
You would not thank that which was not a person.
Mm-hmm.
Would you? Would you?
No, I don't think I would.
I'm sitting on a chair and I don't thank the chair for supporting me. Okay, so that's one thing. And then the other aspect, I want to just widen that out just a bit, and that is that when we have a sense of gratitude to God or the gods, or however you want to put this in religious terms, we have a sense also that we can express this gratitude, and this is a phenomenological thing, that we can express this gratitude by what we do for others, and especially by what we do for the poor, right? The love of God is poured into our hearts through the love of Christ is poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit, that we to love others. So we phenomenologically experience that our gratitude to God can be expressed by caring for others, and especially by caring for the poor, right? And it's made very explicit in Christian theology especially, and that we care for the undeserving, because that which we have the phenomenological experience of being grateful for is that for which we are undeserving. Okay?
Yeah.
So we know we have a sense of having undeserved, of being grateful for things that we do not deserve. Right?
Yeah.
And so that we can express that gratitude by giving not just to the deserving poor. You know, like G.K. Chesterton said, if they're deserving, you can only express charity to the undeserving, because if they're deserving, it's not charity, it's justice. Right?
Yeah, right.
So, so before, we have this, before God, we are all beggars. So we give to the beggars because we are all beggars before God. So I think that these things are also part of the phenomenology of religion, not just the self-transcendence. So that's now to the relevance realization question.
Yeah.
All right, that's where you want to get, right? Do you want to say what it is, and then we can talk about it?
Sure. So the issue is, especially if we want to have a way of articulating Christianity without the two worlds mythology that does not work that well, this new formulation has to be viable to modern people. It has to fit with what we know today of the world, and our scientific knowledge constrains the space of metaphysical theories we can come up with. And one of the constraints is that if we want to say that God, the ground of being, or the ground of intelligibility, and so on, are persons, we have to find some relevance realization in them, and we have to explain how it is. So that's one thing. We have to put realization somehow in God, and then the second issue, which I think is comes later, or at least I think it's I think it needs to come later, to explain how it is that there is a cosmic narrative, starting from that God, that cosmic relevance realization mind, going to the end, which is also that cosmic mind, that relevance realization God, and how. So yes, so the challenge is twofold. First, you need to find relevance realization in God, and two, you need to explain how this is a cosmic narrative, in which there is relevance realization. Because so now to flesh this out further, in the case of God, of trying to find relevance realization in God, I haven't seen this anywhere yet, at least, because traditionally we attribute personhood to God because he has intellect and will, and this is framed in classical metaphysics, where intellect is the possession of forms, of other forms, I should say. So, for instance, I possess the form of this small bottles. I possess the form of this because I can I know how to grasp it. I know what it's. I have an idea what it's made of. I know its shape and so on. And this is a form that I have in me. I possess that form. Whereas if I take, let's say, just the small bottle, that bottle has its own form. I mean, it has a structural functional organization. It's holding together in this way. Its matter is not just spread out in any which way. It has a particular form, a particular organization, and that bottle has that form. But it has no other form. This bottle doesn't possess the form of the table or whatever. It's just this form. And what differentiates intellect from non-intellect is that intellect possesses other forms. So I possess forms of other things, and in the classical tradition, if you take, let's say, Aquinas or Aristotle or a bunch of classical metaphysicians,
you abstract the form. You abstract from the form.
Yeah, you see that the forms are somehow they're eminent in God, because God is the ground of all being, and so since he's the ground of all being, he's the ground in particular of this bottle. So by being the ground of this bottle, he possesses the form. I mean, he gives rise to that bottle. So of course he possesses the form of that bottle, but that's in a way which is different from our own. But anyways, this is an old metaphysics of thinking of the world in terms of forms. And we need to find a way today to explain how it is that God can not just somehow possess the forms, but possess them in a way that does relevance realization. Because, for instance, I can possess the form of lots of things without being conscious. I can sometimes, let's say I tie my shoes and I'm unconscious of them. So there's a way in which I possess the form of shoelacing because I can do it, but I'm not conscious of it. And so we wouldn't want to say that God possesses the forms of objects in the world that we wouldn't want to say that he possesses the forms in that unconscious way, in the same way that I possess the forms of my shoelaces when I'm lacing them unconsciously. And as far as I understand John's relevance realization concept is that it's the set of constraints we put on the potential we see from the world, and we constrain it down to something with which we can actually interact. So, and this process is always ongoing. It's we see this very much as an economy. It's a set of constraints in an environment. So if I was to take, let's say, my relevance realization engine, my brain, my eyes, and so on, and I was put in an environment with which I've never interacted, a way with which my constraints are not used to dealing with, I would not really be able to do relevance realization. It would just be pure chaos. I would really be conscious. So the environment is part of it. And then, of course, the other part of it is that I take all of that potential. So let's say, I take there's tons of things I could see in this room, but I constrain it down to pretty much this screen so I can see even just parts of your face so I can interact with you. There are things I could say that I also, there's lots of things I could say, ways I could move my mouth, I could move my lungs and so on, and I constrain it down to just a few possible words I can say, and I just sort of thread that small needle of possibility which I can actually say. And this whole process is always ongoing. So I take the potential in the environment, I constrain it, then I do something, then I have other possibilities which come from the environment, and I constrain it then, and this keeps going and going and going. And I think what you would need to do is to find some place for this in the Trinity. Try to see where it is that this possibility and then constraints keep co-occurring with each other, keep dancing in a relevance realization process.
Okay, well, let me take a stab at it. Okay.
All right.
So I'm going to say, let me start with the Father. Okay. So I'm going to ask the question, what is relevant to the Father? And I'm going to answer that. What is relevant to the Father is to show love to the Son by fulfilling the Son's deepest desire, which was to show love to the Father. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, how was that? What did that mean? That meant that the Father gave the Son, and creation is for the Son, right?
Mm-hmm.
Gave the Son the creation in order for the Son to show love to the Father in some way through the creation.
Mm-hmm.
And what is relevant for the Son is to show love to the Father. What is relevant to the Holy Spirit is to manifest the love of the Father and the Son within creation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
My voice from my cold.
And
so I think that within the Trinity that we can see that there's relevance. Then in Christian theology, we're drawn into the life of the Holy Trinity, which is a great mystery.
Mm-hmm.
Just the fact that we can talk about it doesn't mean we're really grasping it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But what are we to the Trinity? So if you think about it, we are those who are one by the Son,
mm-hmm.
sanctified by the Spirit, then offered to the Father,
Mm-hmm.
offered back to the Father as the whole completeness of the creation that he intended for us to be at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And this, okay, you talk about it in terms of a story. This is, you know, this is we'll say it's a narrative with chapters that close and then reopen. So it is a closed narrative. We can say that at the end of our life, there's a closed narrative, but then there's a reopening of narrative as we enter into the life of the Holy Trinity. The story that is told by the cosmos is constantly a new story. Even the ended stories become new stories. Let me see if I can illustrate. Okay, so let's take a story from the Bible. So David and Bathsheba are both dead. And we can just assume that they both also ended up in heaven. They committed great sin. Well, David especially committed the sin with Bathsheba. He's the most responsible party. Mm-hmm. And his sin that he committed with Bathsheba, you know, and the story of his life is over, and that sin is part of that story. Mm-hmm. But that story now becomes part of the life of everyone who reads it and responds to it, mm-hmm. and is affected by it, mm-hmm. right? Yeah. So it's both closed and ongoing. And all of our stories are like that. Like, we don't, even, this is a process that happens, and this is the process of self-transcendence, isn't it? Because it's the constant reevaluation of the past, of what came before, of what happened before. When we get to a point where something terrible has happened to us that caused great grief and great harm, and we come to a point where it's sometime in our life we actually thank God for that thing, because we realize the graces that ended up coming from it, or the good that ended up coming from it. But some of that stuff we may not recognize it until many generations on earth have passed, and we're looking at it from eternity. So I think that the Trinitarian theology can open to this concept of relevance realization. I do want to say one of John's strongest points is when he talked about tendency to want to close and say, I have the final metaphysic. And I think he is correct in saying that attitude is wrong. Is a wrong attitude.
I think it's idolatrous.
Yeah, it is, because it's making our conception of reality our God.
Yeah. Or even our conception of God instead of
right.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And it's not as if Christ came down to give us metaphysics lesson.
Right. Yeah.
I'd like to go back to especially the Trinity discussion, because as much as possible, I'd like to frame it in ways that do not appeal, I'd like to frame it in ways that can refer back to notions like the ground of being or ground of intelligibility, and love and so on, terms that are not explicitly Christian, so as to flesh out the metaphysics in ways that are more viable to non-Christians or people who are not Christian yet, because this is part of the challenge. And there have been many attempts to try to explain what it is exactly that the Father refers to ontologically, and the Son and the Holy Spirit and so on. And we have already talked a bit about this, but especially I think your insight there is right. And we talked about it a bit in our last discussion as well, of trying to bring love into this, of how it is that I think fundamentally the constraint to do relevance realization, we need to look for constraints. There has to be some sort of limitedness, which John talked about as well. There has to be some finiteness, some lack we try to address, some obstacles somewhere for us to actually constrain being for, and having love as the guide there, I think, is a great insight of the Father has to do relevance realization to do what is best for the Son, and the Son has to do what is best for the Father, and so on. So you do get constraints there, and I would like to put that, if I could, in terms of ground of being, ground of intellect, ground of intelligibility, to appeal to notions which John himself uses, and to appeal to notions which a naturalist needs to use. Like John says, you have to explain possibility in your ontology. If you're a physicalist, you have to explain somehow the order as well. So you need some sort of ground of being. You need a ground of possibility, where it is that things are possible. Especially if, as we mentioned earlier, if you look at the bottom of the world in physics, it seems there's just possibility there. There's, nothing really concrete. There's just a bunch of possibilities. It's statistics. And on the other end, naturalists also have to say that, well, there are laws that they're trying to study. Those laws exist somehow. There are constraints. There's a ground of intelligibility. And then there's somehow a connection between the two. There's a relation between possibility and constraints. And if I could map that with the Trinity, I would really, really be happy of saying how it is that let's say the Father is the ground of being, is the one who is spewing forth all of that possibility, all the potential we see in the world. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void. It seems like the Father created a bunch of potential there. The earth was without form and void. He created a lot of potential for eventually the Son to the Word, to order that all of that possibility. So you can see maybe like the Father is trying to put possibility for the Son, and then the Son will try to also order that possibility in order to do the will of the Father, to do what the Father wants to do. And every time God creates something in the Trinity, in the same, every time where the Father creates some possibility and the Son constrains it with the Word, God says that it was good as well. So you can put the Holy Spirit in there, where the constraint of aiming for goodness was present all along when the Father was creating possibility, when the Son was putting intelligibility on it all, when it was shaping that possibility. So I don't know if what I'm saying it starts to make sense, but I'm trying to figure out how it is that we can see how the ground of being, the Father, is doing relevance realization to do the good of the Son, how the Son is trying to do relevance realization to do the good of the Father, and how the Holy Spirit is helping both of them in his relevance realization.
Well, fools rush in where angels are there to tread. So when the angels approach the Holy Trinity, they cover their faces and they say, "Holy, holy, holy." And I think we may need to kind of take a step back and realize that that it's a mystery. It's a mystery of love, and it's a mystery of being, and we're connecting love, life, truth, and being together in God. And like I said before, that I think all of creation can be summed up in the one sentence that the Son says to the Father, "You have prepared a body for me." That the incarnation and the crucifixion end up being the constraint upon all of creation. That creation is created that this event might happen, and that the creation, the crucifixion, the resurrection, the redemption, the consummation, it's all one act of love within God. It only looks like a separate thing to us because we're living it out in time. And I think we just get into a space where as we consider these things, we're led into contemplation and an encounter with that love. And I think we kind of have to leave it there, because otherwise we're trying to explain things that are like so far above us. In terms of the Trinity, in terms of God being the ground of being, that is the philosopher's God, and that is the God that we can come to by reason, and maybe when we come to that, we say, well, the evidence is still ambiguous. But then we're left, and this was, I would say, Thomas Aquinas' great insight point, that once we've gotten to that point by reason, even if it's ambiguous, even if we consider the evidence ambiguous, we're left in a position of questioning, and then we have to wait for revelation. So the Trinity is not something that we reason, that we figure out, but is something that is revealed. It's a revealed truth. That's what we say as Catholics. It's revealed. Now Ratzinger said, we have to be careful not to plead the mystery just because we want to fill our theology with a bunch of contradictory nonsense and then go, oh, it's a mystery. We're not going to do that. So we can apply our reason to the revelation. But in terms of getting to the Trinity, the Trinity is, we got to the Trinity by revelation. And it's a thing, when you were talking about creation and you were talking with John and you said, well, it's maybe not the way we would have done it, but here's the thing, sometimes people will say, well, if I were God, and they never follow that up with saying, if I were God, I would make myself a baby and grow up as a man in poverty, and then I would allow humans to kill me. And after they killed me, I would come back and turn myself into bread so they could eat me. That's never the end of the sentence that a human being says when they say, if I were God. So when it comes to the theodicy and the mystery, what the scriptures call the mystery of evil, the answer to that, to the mystery of evil, is the crucifixion. That is the answer, because like John Paul II said, that we want to judge God. We want to place God at the bar of our judgment. And God's response to that was to come to earth and place himself at the mercy of our judgment. And when we look at the crucifix, we see our judgment of God. And at some point, we have to just close our mouths.
Yeah, I think that I was definitely too ambitious trying to explain the whole Trinity, and I don't think it's possible, as we said. I mean, metaphysics, we don't want to idolatrize metaphysics, but I think there's the fundamental thing that we wouldn't, because we need to bring in love to explain how it is that there can be some constraints on the ground of being, how it is that he can be a conscious, how it is that he can do relevance realization, and that is not just a no thing, as John likes to say, that is just a
right
intellectless no entity, whatever. We need to.
But John has a problem, because John said that the ground of being expresses itself. What expresses itself?
Well, I mean, it can. Yeah.
And if there's a ground of intelligibility that is making what comes into being intelligible, it has to be making a choice, because it has to be choosing among all the possibilities, those which are intelligible. What is it that makes a choice? I mean, to me, he's using personalist language, even though he's avoiding the relevance realization. But that which expresses itself and that which makes a decision is still a person.
Okay. So that's a good point. So is constraint okay? So because we would like to bring in the fact that the constraint is love, and this, and then we have to answer the problem of evil. That indeed God made the world out of love. But at the very least, even if John doesn't want to put love as his constraint, he still has to explain how it is that the ground of being constrained himself so as to be intelligible. There's still some constraints there, because it could have been just purely random, conceivably.
Right.
If all you have is a ground of being, why is there any intelligibility at all?
But the other question is, how is it that being itself shares being with others? You see,
the ground of being, you mean, or
the ground of being, which is being itself. Being itself is the ground of being. When we say the ground of being, we mean being itself.
Well, this gets tricky. John corrected me in one of my videos I made at some point about this, where there are classical theists who say that God is being with a capital B, and this is a way of talking about God analogically, meaning not that God is a being like other beings.
No, I'm not saying a being.
Yeah.
I'm not saying a being. I'm not saying a thing in the universe or something like that. I'm saying being itself. Being itself
as the ground of all being.
The ground of all being, uncontingent being.
Yep.
We know there are contingent beings. We're contingent, right?
Yep.
So that means that being itself had to decide to bring into being contingent beings. Non-contingent being had to decide to share being with contingent beings. Otherwise, how do the contingent beings come to be? Unless being itself is such an, I didn't want to say entity because it's like another word for thing, but is that which can share a being with contingent things. So there's a decision. So, relevance realization aside, once you're talking about decision, once you're talking about expression, you're still talking about things that, things that to the best of our understanding are only associated with a person. So what I would say is that John has not avoided a personal ground of being in the way that he thinks he has. I think there's still elements of personhood within his.
Yeah, and this gets to a point, a question which he asked Paul van der Klee at the end of one of their discussions, was that if there had never been any sentient beings in the world, would it still be true to say that God is a person? Let's say, I think the worry would be that if there's it's annoying because I'll sort of answer the question as I'm asking it, but as we see that there are beings that, as you said, the ground of being shares being with beings, well, this means that indeed there had to be constraints on the ground of being. You had to put some constraints for this to occur because it's marvelously complex, the fact that there are beings in addition to the ground of being. So as this so because we can see, this is getting messed up, but because we can see that there are beings, we don't even need to talk about sentient beings like he did in his question. The fact that there are any beings at all shows that the ground of being had to constrain himself in some way, so that he was most likely doing some sort of relevance realization. And you almost get to some sort of anthropic principle there, where indeed, if there had never been any sentient beings, if there had never been any being at all, then maybe the ground of being wouldn't have done relevance realization. But since we see that there are beings, there are contingent beings in addition to the ground of being, then the ground of being was somehow conducting relevance realization even before, let's say, he created those beings. You see what we're
Yeah,
getting
I
at?
think, and I think, again, I think that this is why, every time you turn around, the Trinity proves its value as its conceptual value, because you have within the Trinity the one and the many. You have both you have both that which is all and that which is not all, right? Because you've got the all of God, of the being of God, but then you've got the Father is not the Son, the Father is the Holy Spirit is not the Father. You've got within this within the three persons a limitation, although it's not a limitation of their being, but it's a limitation of the person. It's the persons are in relation, and persons make room for one another. So there's that constant, that giving way, the giving way to the other, that is in the dynamic of the relationship between persons. And then, what we're saying as Christians, we're saying this being, this Holy Trinity, this blessed Trinity of love, is inviting us into relationship, and in some way that we cannot comprehend in our finite, with our finite limited minds, is going to make a space for us in eternity. And people who want to say that we don't have enough details about that, and we can't say enough about it to make it seem concrete enough for them to believe in it, I just have to go, so it's like a baby in the womb. You could not explain to it life outside of the womb. You just could not. I mean, how could you communicate to that baby what it's like to breathe air, what it's like to eat food, what it's like to walk around? You could not explain any of those things to that baby. And yet that baby is going to go from that state of weightless, being held weightless in the water of the womb, receiving nutrition through the umbilical cord, and breathing in the amniotic fluid, to breathing air and eating food and walking around. And there's no way that you could put the thoughts into the mind of the baby that would possibly explain that. So maybe we just have to, at some point, trust, At some point we walk by faith, not by sight.
Yeah. I think this may be a good point to end it. This is getting difficult, but it was very instructive. I found those conversations are really good for me, because I spent a lot of time doing philosophy of mind in my panpsychist area, but I didn't do that much philosophy of religion. I didn't do that much theology, really. It's only when I got sort of thrust into those conversations that they started to happen, and I've been learning so much. It's kind of crazy, and I'm very thankful for people like you, John, and Paul, who I've been, and I should also mention Jonathan Pajot, because I've been talking to him for a while, and this has been a very intense learning experience, and I've been benefited a lot from it. And I'm surprised that people like to to watch those conversations, but I'm very happy about it.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what your next conversation with John Vervaeke is and how he bounces off of this if he does. And anyway, I think he got a little bit of ammunition.
Yeah, that was very helpful. It's always a real pleasure talking to you.
Same, likewise. And maybe we'll do it again sometime. All right. Take care.
Yeah, sure. Take care. You too.
Bye.
Bye.